The gentle giant arrives the Nexus diplomatic station. Hung in space like a crystal flower, its transparent corridors and gleaming conference halls designed to inspire peace and cooperation among the galaxy's many species. Today, it hosted one of the most important negotiations in recent memory, the potential alliance between humanity and the powerful Valdorian Empire. High Chancellor Vextar of the Valdorian Empire stood nearly 8 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the station's artificial sunlight. His compound eyes tracked the movement of various alien diplomats as they prepared for the human delegation's arrival. The Valdorians had been skeptical about these newcomers to galactic society, but recent reports of human technological achievements had sparked their interest. The docking bay announcements echoed through the station's corridors as the human transport ship completed its approach. Species from across the galaxy had gathered to witness this first formal diplomatic contact. The insectoid Clicktar delegates chittered nervously among themselves, while the gaseous, ethereal collective hummed in their containment suits. Everyone was curious about these mysterious humans who had seemingly appeared from nowhere with surprisingly advanced technology. Commander Sarah Chun stepped through the airlock with the quiet grace of someone comfortable in her own skin. She stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, with gentle brown eyes and shoulder-length black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her diplomatic uniform was standard-issue navy blue, crisp and professional but unremarkable. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth as she surveyed the gathered aliens with genuine curiosity and warmth. The assembled delegates exchanged glances that ranged from confusion to barely concealed disappointment. This small, soft-spoken woman was humanity's representative. High Chancellor Vextar's mandibles clicked in what his species considered polite bewilderment. The humans were smaller than expected, certainly less impressive than the warrior races that typically commanded respect in galactic politics. Sarah approached the reception committee with measured steps, her movements precise but unhurried. Each footstep made a subtle metallic sound that most observers attributed to standard magnetic boots used in low-gravity environments. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her posture relaxed but attentive to Dr. Zephran, the station's chief xenobiologist, observed the human with professional interest. Her species, the Quindal, resembled tall, slender humanoids with pale blue skin and enlarged craniums that housed their enhanced brains. Through her sophisticated sensor equipment, Zephran noted that the human's biosignature was surprisingly strong for such a small creature, though she attributed this to species variation rather than anything unusual. The formal introductions began in the station's grand reception hall. High Chancellor Vextar's translator rendered his deep, resonant voice into standard galactic common as he welcomed the human delegation. His species valued strength and military prowess above all else, and he struggled to understand how these apparently fragile beings had developed technology advanced enough to warrant serious diplomatic attention. Sarah responded with perfect diplomatic protocol, her voice carrying easily across the large chamber despite its softness. She expressed humanity's eagerness to establish peaceful relations and share knowledge with the galactic community. Her words were carefully chosen and respectful, but several alien delegates noted a subtle undertone of absolute confidence that seemed at odds with her diminutive appearance. The preliminary negotiations moved to a smaller conference chamber designed for intimate diplomatic discussions. The room featured a sunken floor covered in what appeared to be soft, yielding material that accommodated the various physical requirements of different species. Crystalline formations grew from the walls, providing natural acoustics that enhanced communication between diverse vocal ranges. As the delegates settled into their respective seating arrangements, Chancellor Vextar made a formal announcement. The Valdorian Empire wished to honor humanity with a traditional gesture of respect and trust. According to ancient Valdorian custom, all participants in sacred negotiations must remove their footwear to demonstrate their connection to the ground they shared and their commitment to standing together as equals. The various alien species began removing their various forms of foot coverings, protective shells, and environmental boots. The process was ceremonial, with each delegate placing their footwear in designated areas while reciting brief statements of peaceful intention. The ritual was considered deeply meaningful in Valdorian culture, representing vulnerability and mutual trust. Sarah smiled warmly at the explanation and immediately began unlacing her boots without hesitation. Several delegates noted her enthusiastic participation in their customs, though they remained puzzled by the complexity of her footwear. Her boots appeared to be much more sophisticated than simple protective gear, featuring multiple layers of advanced materials and what looked like small technological components integrated into the soles. What nobody in the chamber realized was that Sarah's boots were not merely footwear, but essential life support equipment. Each boot contained a sophisticated gravitational compensation system, atmospheric processors, and structural integrity enhancers designed to protect both Sarah and her environment from the consequences of her unique physiology. As Sarah carefully removed her first boot, placing it gently beside her chair, there was a subtle shift in the chamber's atmosphere. The artificial gravity generators hummed at a slightly different frequency, and sensitive individuals among the gathered species felt an inexplicable sense of weight settling over the room. Dr. Zephran's instruments registered minute fluctuations in local gravitational fields, but the readings were so unusual that she initially dismissed them as sensor malfunction. The second boot came off with equal care, and Sarah set it precisely beside the first. She wiggled her toes briefly, stretching after the confines of the specialized footwear, then settled back into her chair with obvious relief. Her smile remained bright and genuine as she looked around at her fellow delegates, completely unaware of the invisible changes her presence was creating in the chamber's carefully balanced environment. For a moment, everything seemed perfectly normal. The diplomatic protocols continued, with Chancellor Vextar beginning his formal welcome speech and various delegates nodding approvingly at the successful completion of the traditional ceremony. The chamber's environmental systems hummed quietly in the background, maintaining optimal conditions for the diverse assembly of life forms. Then Sarah shifted in her chair to get more comfortable. The sound that followed was like nothing the assembled delegates had ever heard. It began as a low groaning, almost subsonic, that seemed to emanate from the very structure of the chamber itself. The crystalline acoustic formations began to resonate in harmony, creating an eerie musical note that grew steadily louder. The specialized flooring material, designed to accommodate beings weighing up to several tons, began to compress and deform in ways that violated its engineering specifications. Hairline cracks appeared in the chamber walls, spiderwebbing outward from points of structural stress that shouldn't have existed. The artificial gravity generators fluctuated wildly as they attempted to compensate for forces they weren't designed to handle. Emergency lighting activated as the chamber's primary power grid struggled to maintain stability under unprecedented load conditions. Sarah looked around with growing concern as the various delegates began to panic. Some species fled toward the exits, while others activated emergency protective protocols or called frantically for assistance. Chancellor Vextar's compound eyes dilated in alarm as his exoskeleton detected vibrations that registered as seismic activity despite their location in deep space. The station's automated systems kicked into crisis mode. Emergency bulkheads sealed off adjacent sections as structural integrity sensors reported catastrophic failure potentials throughout the diplomatic wing. Maintenance drones swarmed through the corridors, their sensors unable to identify the source of the systematic failures spreading through the station's framework. Dr. Zephran remained in the chamber, her scientific curiosity overriding her survival instincts as her instruments registered readings that challenged her understanding of physics. The gravitational anomalies were centered directly on the human delegate, creating field distortions that should have been impossible for any biological entity to generate. Sarah finally understood what was happening as she watched the chaos unfold around her. She carefully stood up from her chair, moving with deliberate slowness, and the groaning sounds intensified dramatically. Each minute adjustment of her position created new stress patterns in the chamber structure, and she realized with growing horror that her very presence was destroying the carefully engineered diplomatic facility. The emergency evacuation alarms began blaring throughout the station as the crisis spread beyond the conference chamber. Engineering teams reported critical failures in multiple systems, with damage patterns that defied conventional explanation. The pristine diplomatic station that had hosted peaceful negotiations for centuries was experiencing its first genuine structural emergency, and nobody understood HFY as Sarah stood, motionless in the center of the chaos, surrounded by fleeing aliens and failing technology. She made a decision that would change the course of galactic diplomacy forever. She reached for her communicator with careful, precise movements and activated an emergency channel to her ship. The response came immediately in crisp, professional tones that carried easily over the chaos. Captain Maria Santos's voice acknowledged the situation and requested instructions. Sarah took a deep breath, causing several nearby structural supports to emit concerning sounds, and uttered the words that would transform humanity's reputation throughout the galaxy. She explained that they had a slight environmental compatibility issue and requested immediate consultation with the engineering specialists aboard her vessel. The assembled alien delegates, those who remained in the chamber, listened in stunned silence as this small, polite human discussed the systematic destruction of their most advanced diplomatic facility as if it were a minor scheduling conflict. The true revelation was only beginning. The truth unfolds. The emergency response team that arrived at the diplomatic chamber consisted of the galaxy's finest engineers, scientists, and crisis management specialists. They found Sarah standing perfectly still in the center of what had once been an architectural marvel, now transformed into a study of structural engineering failure. The chamber walls showed stress patterns that formed geometric spirals radiating outward from her position, as if reality itself was being warped by her presence. Chief Engineer Tokmar of the Nexus Station was a member of the Builders Guild, a species renowned throughout the galaxy for their mastery of construction and spatial engineering. His 4 arms worked frantically with diagnostic equipment, while his auxiliary brain processed data streams that defied conventional physics. The readings suggested that a localized gravitational field approximately 20 times normal was emanating from the small human female, but such a phenomenon should have collapsed into a miniature black hole rather than standing around looking apologetic to Doctor. Zephyran had established a makeshift laboratory in an adjacent chamber, her equipment arrays focused on analyzing Sarah from a safe distance. Her preliminary scans revealed biological signatures that challenged everything she understood about organic life forms. The human skeletal structure showed density levels comparable to neutron star material, while her muscular system displayed energy patterns that suggested some form of exotic matter integration. High Chancellor Vextar had remained in the chamber despite the obvious danger, his warrior's pride refusing to allow him to retreat from what might be either a threat or an opportunity. His compound eyes tracked Sarah's every micromovement while his combat instinct screamed conflicting signals. She appeared completely harmless, even concerned about the damage she was causing, yet his species-evolved threat detection systems were registering her as the most dangerous entity he had ever encountered. Sarah finally broke the tense silence with the same gentle voice that had welcomed them hours earlier. She explained that she represented humanity's diplomatic heavy division, a specialized branch of their foreign service designed to facilitate communication with species and civilizations that existed in extreme environments. Her tone remained conversational and friendly, as if discussing the weather rather than revealing information that would rewrite galactic understanding of human capabilities. The concept of diplomatic heavy division initially confused the assembled aliens until Sarah began describing her previous assignments. She had successfully negotiated mining rights with the Forge Collective, a civilization that existed within the core of a gas giant where atmospheric pressure measured in the millions of units. She had established trade agreements with the Crystal Singers, beings who lived in the gravitational shear zones around binary neutron stars. Most recently, she had completed cultural exchanges with the Deep Dwellers, entities that made their homes in the quantum foam at the edge of black hole event horizons. Each casual mention of these impossible environments sent waves of shock through the scientific community monitoring the situation. Dr. Zephyran's equipment registered her own elevated stress responses as she struggled to process the implications of Sarah's revelations. The human was describing routine diplomatic missions to locations that galactic science considered unsurvivable by any known form of organized matter. Chief Engineer Tokmar interrupted with urgent questions about human modification technology. His species had experimented with biological enhancement for millennia, but they had never achieved anything approaching the capabilities Sarah was describing. She responded with characteristic patience, explaining that human enhancement programs had developed out of necessity rather than ambition. Earth's location in what galactic surveys had classified as a hostile zone meant that most interesting neighbors existed in environments that unmodified humans couldn't survive. Rather than limit their diplomatic reach, humanity had developed comprehensive enhancement programs that could adapt their representatives to virtually any conceivable conditions. Sarah described the process with the same matter-of-fact tone she might use to explain a vaccination program. The biological modifications were extensive, but carefully managed. Her skeletal system had been replaced with a hybrid framework of enhanced calcium carbonate and synthetic diamond lattices that provided structural integrity under extreme gravitational stress. Her muscular system incorporated manufactured proteins that could operate efficiently across a wide range of environmental conditions while generating forces measured in tons rather than pounds. More sophisticated were the technological integrations that bordered on science fiction even by galactic standards. Her cardiovascular system included synthetic components that could process virtually any atmosphere and extract necessary elements from exotic materials. Neural enhancements provided real-time environmental monitoring and threat assessment, while quantum processors integrated with her nervous system allowed her to interface directly with alien technologies and communication systems. The revelation that sent the assembled scientists into theoretical crisis was Sarah's explanation of her gravitational management systems. The human body, even enhanced, could not naturally generate the gravitational fields that their instruments were detecting. Instead, Sarah carried an integrated network of exotic matter generators that created localized space-time distortions to counteract the extreme forces she routinely encountered in her diplomatic missions. Dr. Zefran found herself questioning fundamental assumptions about the relationship between technology and biology as Sarah described these systems. The human spoke of carrying microscopic black holes in specialized containment organs, of manipulating quantum fields through conscious thought, and of existing simultaneously in multiple dimensional phases to facilitate communication with beings that operated outside conventional spacetime. What disturbed the alien scientists most was Sarah's casual attitude toward these extraordinary capabilities. She spoke of them as tools rather than powers, as practical solutions to diplomatic challenges rather than weapons or threats. When pressed about the military applications of such technology, she seemed genuinely confused by the question. The conversation was interrupted by alarms indicating new arrivals at the station. Admiral Christok of the Hegemony Fleet had detected the crisis and was approaching with a battle group, interpreting the systematic failures at the diplomatic station as evidence of an attack. His species, the Korthak, were renowned throughout the galaxy for their aggressive territorial expansion and their tendency to view diplomacy as a prelude to conquest. High Chancellor Vextar activated emergency communications to explain the situation, but Admiral Christok's response suggested he viewed the human enhancement revelations as confirmation of his species' long-held suspicions about the dangers of allowing new civilizations into galactic society. The Korthak had built their empire through preemptive strikes against potential threats, and they considered the humans to represent an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. Sarah listened to the communications with growing concern, her enhanced hearing allowing her to detect undertones in the alien language that the translators missed. The approaching fleet commander was not interested in explanations or peaceful resolutions. His tactical discussions with his subordinates revealed plans for what they termed aggressive containment protocols, which appeared to involve destroying the station along with everyone aboard to prevent the spread of what they considered a human contamination. The station's defensive systems were designed for protection against pirates and raiders, not military fleets. Chief Engineer Tokmar's tactical assessments indicated they could not survive a determined assault from Admiral Christok's battle group. The situation that had begun as a diplomatic celebration was rapidly evolving into a potential massacre. Dr. Zefran found herself in the unusual position of looking to a human for protection rather than protection from the human. Her scientific analysis of Sarah's capabilities suggested that the enhanced diplomat might represent their only hope of survival against the approaching threat. The irony was not lost on her that the being they had initially dismissed as harmless might be the only thing standing between them and annihilation. Sarah made a decision that would define the future of human-galactic relations. She politely asked the remaining delegates to evacuate to the station's emergency shelters while she dealt with the approaching crisis. Her tone remained calm and professional, but there was an underlying note of determination that made it clear she was no longer operating in pure diplomatic mode. As the alien delegates reluctantly retreated to safety, Sarah began what she described as preparation for hostile contact protocols. The changes in her behavior were subtle but unmistakable. Her movements became more precise, her awareness more focused, and the gravitational distortions around her began to shift in ways that made the nearby instrumentation emit increasingly urgent warnings. The approaching fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and a command dreadnought, more than enough firepower to reduce the diplomatic station to component atoms. Admiral Kristock's communications had devolved into demands for immediate surrender followed by threats of total destruction. He showed no interest in protecting the innocent alien delegates aboard the station, viewing them as acceptable casualties in the name of galactic security. Sarah stood alone in the damaged diplomatic chamber, surrounded by the evidence of powers she had tried to keep carefully controlled. The peaceful negotiations that had brought her here were over. Now she faced a choice between allowing hundreds of innocent beings to die or revealing capabilities that would change forever how the galaxy viewed humanity. She activated her communicator one final time and spoke words that would echo through galactic history. She requested permission from Earth Command to engage in defensive operations with full capability authorization. The response came immediately, permission granted, with instructions to minimize collateral damage and preserve diplomatic relationships where possible. As Admiral Kristock's fleet moved into attack formation, Sarah began to release the careful constraints that had kept her true nature hidden. The station's remaining systems registered readings that exceeded their measurement capabilities as the small human diplomat prepared to demonstrate why Earth's diplomatic heavy division had never failed to complete a mission. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's definition of diplomacy was far more comprehensive than anyone had imagined. Diplomatic Solution Admiral Kristock's command dreadnought, Inevitable Victory, cut through space with predatory grace, its weapon systems charging as the fleet moved into optimal attack position. The Korthak Admiral stood 8 feet tall on his command bridge, his reptilian features twisted into what his species considered a smile of anticipation. His tactical displays showed the diplomatic station as a helpless target, its defensive capabilities laughably inadequate against his overwhelming firepower. The alien delegates huddled in the station's emergency shelters, their various species united in terror as they monitored the approaching fleet. High Chancellor Vextar found himself in the unprecedented position of hoping that the small human diplomat he had initially dismissed could somehow protect them all. Dr. Zefran's instruments continued to register impossible readings from Sarah's location, suggesting that whatever was about to happen would rewrite their understanding of physics along with galactic politics. Sarah stood in the center of the ruined diplomatic chamber, her eyes closed in concentration as she interfaced with systems that existed partially outside conventional space-time. The careful limitations she had maintained throughout her diplomatic career were dissolving one by one, revealing capabilities that Earth's finest engineers had spent decades developing and refining. Her voice remained calm as she opened a communication channel to the approaching fleet. Admiral Kristock's response to her diplomatic overture was a barrage of plasma fire that would have vaporized any normal space station. The energy beams struck the Nexus station's shields and simply stopped, absorbed by gravitational fields that bent space-time around the facility like a protective cocoon. Sarah had extended her personal defensive systems to encompass the entire station, creating a localized pocket of altered physics where the normal rules of cause and effect became flexible suggestions. The silence that followed was deafening. Admiral Kristoff stared at his tactical displays in disbelief as they registered zero damage from weapons that should have reduced the station to superheated plasma. His fire control officers reported that their targeting systems were malfunctioning, showing impossible readings that suggested their target existed in multiple locations simultaneously while also being partially outside normal space that Sarah's voice carried across all communication frequencies as she made one final attempt at peaceful resolution. She explained that she was authorized to defend the station and its occupants through any means necessary, but she preferred to resolve the situation through negotiation rather than force. Her tone remained respectful and professional despite the circumstances, offering Admiral Kristoff the opportunity to withdraw his fleet and discuss their concerns through proper diplomatic channels. The Korthak Admiral's response revealed the fundamental limitation of a military mindset when confronted with phenomena beyond its comprehension. Unable to accept that his overwhelming firepower had proven ineffective, he ordered his entire fleet to concentrate their fire on the impossible target. 12 heavy cruisers and his command dreadnought unleashed the combined destructive power of a small star, enough energy to sterilize entire planets. The attack lasted exactly 37 seconds before Sarah decided that diplomacy had been given sufficient opportunity to succeed. Her response was measured, precise, and absolutely devastating to the attacker's preconceptions about the balance of power in the galaxy. She didn't destroy the attacking fleet, though her capabilities certainly included that option. Instead, she did something far more psychologically damaging to beings who viewed military might as the ultimate expression of civilization. She simply disabled them with casual efficiency that made their technological superiority irrelevant. The process began with what the fleet sensors registered as spontaneous gravitational anomalies appearing throughout their formation. Each ship found itself caught in localized space-time distortions that prevented their weapons from achieving target lock while simultaneously disrupting their propulsion systems. They could neither attack nor retreat, suspended in pockets of altered physics that operated according to principles their science couldn't explain. Admiral Kristoff watched in horror as his magnificent war fleet was reduced to helpless spectators by phenomena they couldn't fight, couldn't understand, and couldn't escape. His tactical officers reported that their weapons were firing into dimensional spaces that didn't connect to their targets, while his engineers struggled to maintain basic life support as their ship systems were overwhelmed by forces that exceeded their design parameters. Sarah's voice returned to the communication channels, still maintaining the same patient, diplomatic tone she had used throughout the crisis. She explained that she had temporarily isolated each ship in stable gravitational bubbles that would prevent them from causing further harm while allowing their crews to remain safe and comfortable. The effect would dissipate harmlessly in approximately 6 hours, giving everyone time to discuss their differences in a civilized manner. The demonstration of casual invincibility had exactly the psychological impact that Earth's diplomatic strategists had predicted. Species throughout the galaxy measured their strength in terms of military capability, economic influence, and technological advancement. Sarah had just revealed that humanity operated on levels that made such measurements meaningless, while maintaining throughout that they preferred cooperation to conquest. Dr. Zefran emerged from the emergency shelters along with the other delegates, her scientific instruments registering the impossible feat they had just witnessed. A single human diplomat had neutralized a battle fleet without causing a single casualty or even permanent damage to their equipment. The implications were staggering, not just for galactic politics, but for their fundamental understanding of what was possible. High Chancellor Vextar found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about the newcomers to galactic society. The Valdorian Empire prided itself on military strength and strategic thinking, but Sarah had demonstrated that humanity operated on a level that made traditional power structures obsolete. More importantly, she had shown restraint and mercy when she could easily have chosen annihilation. The next several hours transformed what had been intended as routine diplomatic negotiations into the most significant political realignment in galactic history. Sarah returned to her role as patient negotiator, helping the various species process the implications of what they had witnessed while working to establish frameworks for peaceful coexistence. Admiral Kristoff, released from his gravitational prison, found himself in the unprecedented position of being grateful to an enemy who had defeated him. The Korthak military philosophy emphasized strength above all else, and Sarah's demonstration had earned their deepest respect. His species' traditional aggression transformed into eager cooperation as they recognized the opportunity to ally themselves with beings of such incredible capability. The treaty negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic diplomatic history. Rather than the usual complex bargaining between roughly equivalent powers, the session became an exploration of how various species could contribute to a civilization led by beings whose capabilities transcended traditional limitations. Sarah guided the discussions with the same gentle patience she had shown throughout, helping each species find roles that utilize their strengths while contributing to the greater whole. Dr. Zefran found herself appointed as the galaxy's first director of human studies, tasked with trying to understand and catalog the capabilities of Earth's various enhancement programs. Her initial research requests were met with polite cooperation and casual revelations that suggested the diplomatic heavy division represented only one of dozens of specialized human variants. The final treaty established the Terran Galactic Cooperative, a new form of interstellar government that abandoned traditional hierarchies in favor of distributed specialization. Each species would contribute their unique capabilities to collective projects that benefited everyone, while humanity provided the advanced technologies and impossible logistics that made such cooperation practical on a galactic scale. Sarah's mission report to Earth Command was characteristically modest, describing the successful establishment of diplomatic relations with 17 new species and the resolution of a minor military incident through standard defensive protocols. She made no mention of having fundamentally altered the structure of galactic civilization, viewing such outcomes as natural consequences of effective diplomatic technique. The various alien delegates prepared to return to their home worlds with news of the new alliance. Sarah received her next assignment. Earth Command was requesting her services for negotiations with the Void Collective, a civilization that existed in the spaces between dimensions and communicated through controlled manipulations of universal constants. She would need to catch the next transport to the Quantum Observatory, where humanity's Paradox Resolution Division maintained their primary research facility. High Chancellor Vextar, now serving as the cooperative's first coordination director, watched Sarah prepare for departure with something approaching awe. Her next mission would take her to realms that existed outside normal spacetime, to negotiate with beings that most species couldn't even perceive. For her, it was apparently just another day at the office. The galaxy had learned that humanity's approach to diplomacy was comprehensive in ways that transcended traditional understanding. They didn't just negotiate with species that were accessible. They made themselves capable of negotiating with anyone, anywhere, under any conceivable circumstances. The universe was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined, and humanity had quietly made themselves its most effective ambassadors. Sarah's transport departed for destinations that existed in mathematical spaces beyond conventional reality. The newly formed Terran Galactic Cooperative began its work of transforming impossible dreams into everyday miracles. The small human diplomat had politely removed her boots, cracked the floor, and in doing so had opened doorways to possibilities that would reshape the destiny of every thinking being in the galaxy. The age of human diplomacy had begun, and the universe would never be the same.